Brazil, Germany and France are all football superpowers for very obvious reasons. Brazil is enormous, football obsessed, and has established clubs, leagues and academy ecosystems. Meanwhile, Germany and France are among the richest and most populated countries in Europe, as well as having their own very distinct football cultures. A few weeks ago, I made a video about 7 countries that, in theory at least, ought to be much better at football. Countries like India, home to 1.4 billion people and soon to overtake China as the most populated nation on Earth, but with a national football team that ranks below tiny countries like Trinidad and Tobago, Luxembourg, and Palestine in the FIFA World Rankings, and has never appeared at the FIFA World Cup, or DR Congo, a country with more inhabitants than the United Kingdom, France or Germany, where football is the most popular sport, the average age is just 17, and the nation's clubs are highly competitive. But the national football team is abysmal, to put it kindly, ranked below Cape Verde in the FIFA World Rankings. And neither of those two even made the cut, so there were no spoilers there if you haven't watched it yet, and perhaps still plan on doing so, only dishonourable mentions. Well, today I'm turning that premise on its head and making, as I stated in that video, the video that I had intended on making in the first place before getting sidetracked by underachievers, which is the exact opposite. That is to say, world football's biggest overachievers. Countries that, when you look at most of the key indicators and underlying stats, with a particular emphasis on population, simply shouldn't be as good at football as they currently are. It is sort of like my own FIFA World Rankings, the Alfie World Rankings if you like, but on a per head or per capita basis, rather than just overall. I know, it sounds exciting, and there are lots of caveats and honourable mentions to get through, so without any further ado, who most assuredly did not overachieve given his early promise, here are 7 countries that shouldn't be so good at football. 7th, Belgium. There was a time when Belgium was best known for chocolate, waffles, and for their brutal and murderous treatment of enslaved Africans in the Congo. Well, not anymore. Now Belgium is best known for Thibaut Courtois, Kevin De Bruyne, and the Hazard brothers. In fact, many of Belgium's best players, including their all-time record goalscorer Romelu Lukaku, Yuri Tielemans, and until recently Vincent Kompany, are actually of Congolese descent themselves. That certainly seems to have been to Belgium's benefit, but most European national teams continue to reap the rewards of colonialism in some way, but few have such an outstanding squad of players with a population of fewer than 12 million people. Belgium has fewer inhabitants than either Haiti or Rwanda, and not even a third as many as Poland or Ukraine, yet whilst those two rank 22nd and 26th in the FIFA World Rankings, Belgium are all the way up in 4th, one place above England, even off the back of a hugely subpar World Cup, having been ranked uninterrupted as the best men's national team on the planet from 2018 to 2022. It is a remarkable achievement, especially given the pit of despair from which Belgian football has risen over the last 25 years. In the year 2000, Belgium qualified for their first Euro since 1984 as co-hosts along with the Netherlands, but they were dumped out in the group stage on home soil. It was a new low, but it was also a turning point, prompting radical reform, and from which all that is good about Belgian football has followed. Belgium's government and football's governing bodies, most notably the RBFA, decided to adopt a strictly data-driven approach, which was actually made easier to implement at all levels, given the nation's small size. There was a big investment in youth team football and coaching, and immediate results ensured buy-in from almost all quarters. From a rank of 71st in the world in June 2007, which was an all-time low for the national team, Belgium began a rapid ascent. By the early 2010s, despite failing to qualify for Euro 2012, most people could already tell that Belgium were assembling a crack team, And in 2014, Belgium reached the quarter-finals of the World Cup for only the second time, climbing all the way up to 5th place in the FIFA World Rankings. It is deemed an underachievement by some that Belgium's so-called golden generation never won a major trophy, but their very existence was a substantive overachievement in of itself. And no one gave eventual winners France a tougher game at the 2018 World Cup knockouts than Belgium, who only lost 1-0 due to a Samuel Umtiti header in what was the most narrow of games in the semis. What's more, reports of Belgium's demise may have been greatly exaggerated, with the likes of Romeo Lavia, Zeno de Bast, and Amadou Onana, all aged 19 to 21, the conveyor belt of talent in the tiny Western European nation of Belgium doesn't appear to have dried up just yet. 6th, Denmark. Denmark was once best known for the Vikings having a high social safety net and for enslaving Africans on sugar plantations in the Danish West Indies. Actually, that one doesn't really work. I feel like most people have never even heard of the Danish West Indies, but Denmark from that have become a really serious football nation over the last few decades. Having only qualified for one major tournament in over 50 years, Denmark reached the semi-finals of Euro 1984, and they pulled off one of the greatest upsets in the history of international football when they won Euro 92, despite initially having failed to even qualify for the tournament. An achievement that is made all the more remarkable given that the Danes were without their starman Michael Laudrup. Since then, Denmark have been regulars at most major tournaments, reaching the semi-finals of Euro 2020, which was a tournament of collective triumph and trauma for the nation, following Christian Eriksen's collapse and cardiac arrest in the group stage against Finland. That is a heroic record for a nation of fewer than 6 million people. For context, Denmark is smaller than Bulgaria or Turkmenistan, countries that rank 71st and 135th in the FIFA Men's World Rankings. Denmark currently rank 18th, above both Poland and Japan, countries more than 6 and 20 times its size, and having leapfrogged Sweden in recent years, which is roughly twice its size, as the preeminent Scandinavian national team. Denmark is one of the most developed countries in the world, as well as being much smaller than their Scandinavian neighbours, and therefore much more densely populated, excluding the semi-autonomous territory of Greenland, of course. Like Belgium, Denmark have used their small size to their advantage, implementing a strategy of trying to give every child and citizen the opportunity to play football and access to coaching and facilities that are of a standard conducive to their development, twinned with an emphasis on enjoyment and tactical and technical development over results at youth team level. Results might not be important to under-14s, but the results for Denmark overall have been seriously emphatic, with the likes of Kasper Schmeichel, Simon Kjær, and Christian Eriksen all having made it to the very highest level, and having become key players for the national team. The focus of this video is on the men's game primarily, but Denmark are also overachievers within women's football, ranked 15th in the world, above South Korea and Italy, and captained by the sensational Pernille Harder. 5th, the Netherlands. Once best known for tulips, cheese markets, windmills, clogs, canals, and for colonising Indonesia where they implemented a system of strict racial hierarchy and fought for 4.5 years to prevent the Indonesians from gaining independence until the Americans told them to stop it. Alright, and I will also stop doing these now. But just like Belgium, the Netherlands' colonial past has been crucial to their footballing success. Some of the very best Dutch internationals, whether that be Frank Rijkaard, Ruud Gullit or Virgil van Dijk, are of Surinamese descent. Meanwhile, the likes of Clarence Seedorf, Edgar Davids, and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank were actually born in the tiny South American nation, which only gained its independence in 1975. Given that Suriname's population is just 612,000, had they not lost almost all of their best players to the Netherlands, they would have been a shoo-in for this 7 in their own right. The Netherlands, meanwhile, has a population of about 17.5 million people, but has long punched above its weight in the world's most popular sport. Following half a century in the wilderness, the Dutch really began to become a force in world football during the 1970s, with the golden generation playing a uniquely Dutch brand of total football, led by perhaps the greatest European footballer of all time in Johan Cruyff, and marshalled by Rinus Michels. The Netherlands reached the World Cup final with Cruyff in 1974, and then again without him in 1978, but lost both to the respective host nations, West Germany and Argentina. In 2010, the Netherlands reached the World Cup final once again, which they lost once again, playing a rather different style of football in the final on this occasion, which makes them the only national team to have reached 3 World Cup finals without winning a single one. That makes the Dutch sound like underachievers, but they are anything but. Crowned European champions in 1988, barring 2 failed qualifying campaigns in 2016 and 2018, the Netherlands have been remarkably consistent for a nation of their size. An all-time Dutch 11 would give just about any other all-time 11 a game and beat about 98% of them, which does speak volumes. And they still rank 6th in the world to this day, with a plethora of outstanding players. Just one thing splits our first 3 inclusions, Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands, and that is Germany, as you can see on this map. I have nothing more to add to that. I just found it to be an interesting coincidence, and wrongly assumed that you would too. My apologies, it won't happen again. 4th, Uruguay. Our first departure from Europe takes us a long way from our Belgium, Netherlands, tunnel through Germany to Denmark triad, all the way to the southern cone of South America. If this video were a historic or all-time ranking of the best countries at football on a per capita basis, Uruguay would comfortably occupy top spot. A nation of fewer than 4 million people, Uruguay have won the World Cup twice, the same number as France, or as England, Spain, and the Netherlands combined, the Copa America 15 times, which is 6 more than Brazil and the same number as Argentina, and they also won gold in football at the 1924 and 1928 Olympics, considered by some to be the precursor to the creation of the FIFA World Cup, which was itself first hosted and won by Uruguay in 1930, hence why they have 4 stars on their crest. It is practically impossible to square that trophy haul and level of success with Uruguay's tiny size. Uruguay is a third of the size of London in terms of population, yet Uruguay have won twice as many World Cups as England and have 15 more continental crowns. Uruguay is smaller than Panama, Eritrea and Georgia, but still to this day, they rank 16th in the world, 1 place above Colombia, a fellow South American nation that has 15 times as many inhabitants. Uruguay have never failed to qualify for the Copa America, and they haven't missed a World Cup since 2006, reaching the semis for a 5th time in 2010. In that generation alone, Uruguay have had Luis Suarez, Edinson Cavani and Diego Forlan, firepower that almost no other national team could rival, all from a population of just 3.5 million. Uruguay does sit at the heart of a footballing hotbed, bordered by Argentina and right next door to Buenos Aires, and the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul. The country is obsessed with football, evidently, and Montevideo Giants, Penarol and Nacional have among the finest academy systems and pathways anywhere in the world. Still, it is remarkable, and only a minor dip in talent and form over recent years reduces them to 4th. 3rd, the Faroe Islands. The smallest country in this 7, which isn't a country at all strictly speaking, it is a group of islands which are an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, with Denmark already having featured itself in this 7. I have put the Faroe Islands in 3rd, but it could very easily have been 2nd or 1st. an archipelago located roughly equidistant between the north coast of Scotland, the east coast of Iceland, and the west coast of Norway. The Faroe Islands is made up of 18 islands shaped by volcanic activity. It has a population of barely 50,000 people. Sheep outnumber human beings by a ratio of almost 2 to 1. Fish account for roughly 90% of the nation's total exports, and it rains more than 300 days a year. On this tiny, remote, damp and freezing cold collection of islands, which is almost constantly being battered by wind and rain, football has surprisingly flourished, relatively speaking, to a greater extent than almost anywhere else in the world. The Faroe Islands only became FIFA members in 1988 and UEFA members in 1990, but they beat Austria 1-0 in their first ever competitive international, a Euro 1992 qualifier, which had to be played in Sweden since the Faroe Islands didn't have a UEFA-approved stadium, and therefore became known as the Miracle of Landskrona. That victory lives on in Faroese folklore, and the archipelago's passion for football and, particularly their national team, has been enormous ever since. There are more than 160 coaches with UEFA licenses in the Faroe Islands, which is equivalent to one for every 330 inhabitants. Compare that with a major footballing nation like England, where there is one UEFA licensed coach for every 160,000 inhabitants. Over 80% of children, both boys and girls, play football in the Faroe Islands, and there are an incredible number of clubs relative to the archipelago's size. There is a 4-tiered Football League pyramid, with promotion and relegation between all 4 divisions, plus the Faroe Islands Cup, which was founded in 1955. It means that no village is too remote to be touched by football, and for a lot of kids, there isn't a great deal to do locally other than play football. The outcome is a football team that punches well above its weight. The Faroe Islands are yet to qualify for the World Cup or the Euros, but they rank 123rd in the men's rankings, having ranked as highly as 74th in recent years, and 102nd in the women's rankings, having ranked as highly as 60th. Over the past decade, the Faroe Islands have won games against Greece both at home and away, a nation of 10 million people, and earned draws against Kazakhstan, Hungary, and Moldova. 6 months ago, the Faroe Islands won 2-1 in the UEFA Nations League against Turkey, a football-mad nation of 85 million people, or 1,634 times the size of the Faroe Islands. Compare that with the record of a country like San Marino, population 33,000, and whilst they've not yet qualified for a World Cup or Euros, you'll see why the Faroe Islands absolutely deserve to make this 7. Second, Croatia. Once I decided to put the Faroe Islands in 3rd, it was virtually impossible to split 1st and 2nd. Croatia's footballing accomplishments, both historically but particularly over the last 5 years, really are the stuff of miracles. A country which exists partly, though not entirely, just to stop Bosnians from being able to go to the beach, Croatia's coast lies entirely on the Adriatic Sea, and like all of the countries that declared independence following the breakup of Yugoslavia during the early 1990s, it is sparsely populated and has a fairly small population overall. Fewer than 4 million people call Croatia home, which makes Croatia smaller, by population, than the likes of Kuwait, Oman, and Mauritania. Whilst Kuwait, Oman, and Mauritania rank 148th, 75th, and 103rd in the men's FIFA World Rankings respectively, Croatia ranks 7th, above Italy, Portugal, and Spain, having finished as runners-up and third-place playoff winners at the previous 2 World Cups, in addition to winning their 2022-23 UEFA Nations League Group A, and therefore qualifying for this season's UEFA Nations League finals in the Netherlands. In Ivan Rakitic, Mateo Kovacic, Marcelo Brozovic, Mario Pasalic, and most notably, of course, their greatest player of all time, Luka Modric, Croatia have long had one of the best midfields in world football, and in Josko Gvardiol, they now have one of the most highly rated young centre-backs on the planet. I'll just remind you at this point that Croatia has a population of fewer than 4 million people. None of this is normal. What's more, almost all of Croatia's recent and current generations are in some way, shape or form children of the Yugoslav wars. And many, such as Kovacic, Lovren and Rakitic, had already been displaced and weren't born in Croatia at all. And it's not as though the nation's football association or biggest clubs have been free from scandal, chaos, or allegations of corruption. Croatia is immensely passionate about football, has lots of coaches per capita, and has one of the best academies in the world in the form of Dinamo Zagreb. Whilst Croatia have massively punched above their weight when it comes to talent production, it's also true to say that those players themselves have punched above their weight as a collective, and that the whole has been far greater than the sum of its parts. That can be put down to a settled, cohesive squad, incredible mental strength, and the fine work, since 2017, of national team boss Zlatko Dalic, who I think is one of the best managers in international football. 0. Honourable mentions. Before we come to top spot, I want to rifle through some very honourable mentions. The likes of Sweden, Scotland, Austria, Switzerland, Cyprus and Wales are all relatively small European nations who punch far above their weight, and you will most likely be able to add the Republic of Ireland to that, off the back of an extensive period of decline before long, given their high number of talented young players. Historically, Scotland and Sweden would both probably feature, meanwhile Switzerland most likely would have been my 8th inclusion, were this channel called HITC 8s, based upon the here and now. Iceland, it should be said, may very well have taken top spot 5 or 6 years ago, but now their men's national team, disgraced and with their legacy sullied, as I covered in a recent documentary, have suffered a steep decline. The women's team is still excellent though, ranked 14th in the world, and deserving of a mention all of their own. Elsewhere, Argentina isn't a small country, home to 45 million people, but their output in terms of talent and success is still disproportionate to their size. Jamaica has an incredible passion for and culture surrounding the beautiful game, with a population of fewer than 3 million, and would certainly feature if all of the players eligible to represent them actually did, which is another subject that I've covered previously on this channel. Senegal are probably the biggest overachievers in Africa right now, given their population of fewer than 17 million people, as the continent's second highest ranked team behind Morocco, and the reigning African champions. And last but not least, given that football isn't Australia's most popular sport, and the population is around 25 million, despite a steep decline in recent decades, they deserve a mention. And the Socceroos certainly overachieved massively in relation to their actual ability at the 2022 World Cup. Right, most honourable mentions acknowledged then, here is your top spot. First, Portugal. I've flip-flopped multiple times between Croatia and Portugal, and I think you can make an equally legitimate case for both. On the one hand, Portugal is over twice the size of Croatia, home to 10 million people, but hasn't reached the last 4 of either of the last 2 World Cups, whereas Croatia did so at both. On the other hand, Portugal won Euro 2016, Croatia have never won a major trophy. Portuguese football as a whole, beyond just the national team, is certainly of a far higher standard than Croatian football. The women's team is also far superior, and in terms of actual talent production and sheer depth, there is really no comparison. There is probably only France and Brazil that have more depth than Portugal right now, and there are no signs that Portugal's talent pool is drying up. Quite the opposite, in fact. To illustrate my point, in terms of midfielders alone, Roberto Martinez has at his disposal the likes of João Palhinha, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, Vitinha, Otavio, Ruben Neves, Mateus Nunes, João Moutinho, Fabio Carvalho, João Mario, Danilo Pereira, and the uncapped Fabio Vieira, among many, many others. For a country of 10 million people, that is ludicrous. It's not just on the playing front that the Portuguese massively exceed expectations. The same is true, perhaps even more emphatically, when it comes to coaches. Jose Mourinho, Fernando Santos, Sergio Conceição, Jorge Jesus, Marco Silva, Nuno Espirito Santo, Leonardo Jardim, Bruno Lage, Pedro Martins, and Paulo Fonseca all hail from the Portuguese portion of the Iberian Peninsula, and perhaps it is that level of coaching across the board that has facilitated such a large and outstanding crop of players. In Sporting and Benfica in particular, Portugal have two of the finest academies in all of world football. It is worth noting that it wasn't always thus. Between 1930 and 1998, Portugal only qualified for 2 World Cups, one in 1966 and one in 1986, and it wasn't until Euro 96 that Portugal reached only their second European Championship. Since Euro 2000, though, Portugal have qualified for 12 successive Euros and World Cup finals, a record which can only be matched by France, Spain and Germany, and Portugal have reached 2 semis and 2 finals of the Euros during that small time. All in all then, that just about gave them the edge, though the top 3 were very difficult to split. That is it for today's video. Let me know any nations that you think I might have missed, or any similar ideas. I personally found these two, this one and the countries that should be better at football, quite interesting. I hope that you did too. Hit the like button if that was the case. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Feel free to subscribe to both this channel, HITC Sevens, and also my second or backup channel, both of which should be on your screens now, and you can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.